Hey look friends, it's the Step Back Discord. You should join it. Here's an exciting thing. On October 17th, 2018, just 6 days after this video comes out, something historic is going to happen. Canada will become the second country in the world to fully legalize cannabis for recreational use. Uruguay got the drop on us for that one. Now I know over 90% of you aren't Canadians, so let me just give you a quick recap of what's been going on. Up to legalization day, we have talked about what sort of safety precautions we're going to need to make, especially around drivers who we do not, to this time, have a reliable way of detecting whether they're driving while high, and we're trying to figure out where it is and isn't safe to smoke up. But I have a different take to this whole event that I want to bring up with you today. Cannabis is not becoming so much legal as it is becoming legal again. We had thousands and thousands of years where cannabis was a ordinary and simple part of our everyday lives. And now, after a century and change of restrictions and bans, we're going to have to rediscover what our relationship to cannabis will be. So let's tell a story about our relationship with cannabis, marijuana, ganja, weed, bung. Cannabis is a pretty damn useful plant. Throughout history, we have cultivated the stuff for food, to use its fibers for paper and clothing, or for the fact it contains within it a psychoactive drug. And psychoactive drugs, as we've talked about before, have been used over and over again in human history, either as part of a holy ritual or just to feel good for a bit. Cannabis has been with humans for a long time. It, like the grains to make beer, was one of the first plants we figured out how to farm. We have seen Neolithic people growing cannabis and its bred for fabric cousin hemp in Japan, China, and Korea around 10,000 years ago. We've dug up all sorts of references to the plant and actual ropes, clothes, and shoes made from it. It then quickly moved west, passing through India. The passage happened far enough back that the word ganja, which is the Sanskrit word for hemp, has roots back to when we started classifying languages with names like Indo-Aryan. Archaeologists even have a theory that the feel-good drug soma, mentioned in a body of ancient Indian texts called the Vedas, was cannabis. Hindus also incorporated cannabis into their faith more than 1,000 years ago. They called it banga, and today just bong. It's associated with the Hindu god Shiva. And one common drink they make is a bang lassi, which is like a mango lassi that you'd get at an Indian restaurant, but just replace the mango with cannabis. I mean, it could be gross, but it's pretty popular in India, and I'd try it. Please comment in this web zone if you would try bang lassi, and maybe we can make it a thing at Indian restaurants after legalization day. Cannabis seems to have moved then to ancient Assyria, where it got the new name Kanubu, or the way to produce smoke. This is likely where the modern word cannabis originates. From Assyria, it spread across the Mediterranean world and the Black Sea, where several cultures in the Caucasus and the Balkans started to use it in their religious rituals. I mean, Herodotus in the histories wrote about the use of cannabis by the ancient Scythians. There were even ancient Egyptian pharaohs found with it in their tombs so they could pack a ball in the afterlife. From the Middle East, we found the development of a condensed, more potent drug made from the resin of cannabis called hashish. Hash eating was the most common form of taking cannabis as a drug until the 16th century, when smoking was introduced alongside tobacco. Hash was a massive deal in the Islamic world, especially in Iran. It was commonly used by Sufis, the Islamic mystics, and seemed to be exempt from the Muslim ban on intoxicants, or at least they'd go back and forth on it. Without booze, hash was how you took the edge off. From the Middle East, cannabis made its way down into Africa. We can tell it hit Ethiopia around the 14th century and went further south with Bantu settlers. The native peoples of South Africa were already using it by the time Europeans arrived. There was even cannabis deep in the interior of the Congo Basin, thanks to Swahili-speaking traders. Its first arrival in the Americas was in the mid-16th century in Chile, where the Spaniards grew vast amounts of hemp. When English settlers arrived in Virginia, they were required by law to grow hemp as part of their crops because it had so many uses as a fiber. When Napoleon invaded Egypt, where alcohol was banned, these soldiers took up eating hash and brought it back to France, where it became popular, especially among the artists. Some things never change. Many of the famous French painters and artists and many of those American writers who ran away to Paris in the 1920s were regular users of cannabis. Hold the phone. If this plant was around for so long and used in so many places, why was it made illegal at all? Well, like a lot of the worst things in the world, we can thank colonization and racism for that. The Portuguese banned cannabis use in Brazil to control slaves who were using it. Damn, the people who really could have used a bowl, eh? Cannabis use spread throughout the British Empire as indentured servants from India began to move all over it. For similar reasons to the Portuguese, a non-white group who are supposed to be subservient workers using a drug you don't understand, the British began to ban cannabis around their imperial holdings in the 19th century. Although it was so popular and widespread in India, the British could never successfully contain it and abandoned the effort. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, various countries and regions began to follow suit and ban cannabis, usually as a xenophobic reaction to immigrants coming from areas where it was familiar. In the Middle East, the back-and-forth relationship about banning drugs waxed in favor of banning cannabis, and its being mostly under the authority of the Ottoman Empire made the process all the faster. By the mid-20th century, the United States was undoubtedly the dominant political force on Earth. Cannabis, even when illegal, was popular amongst the white counterculture as well as by Black and Latinx Americans. Richard Nixon, as a way to break up these groups who opposed his presidency, used the enforcement of the ban on cannabis as a way to make it a crime to be part of these cultures and justify arresting their leaders, breaking up their groups, and throwing a lot of them in prison. When you're the hegemonic empire of the world, the rest of the world follows suit. The US has been at the forefront of bullying any country playing with liberalizing their bans on cannabis since the declaration of this war on blacks, drugs. Man, that's dark. Who knew putting bans in place to oppress slaves, indentured servants, or to criminalize dissidents and people belonging to oppressed racial groups would turn out to be bad? So how did we get from this to Canada legalizing our old green friend next week? Not too surprisingly, we can thank the Dutch. Starting in 1972, the Dutch began to allow recreational use of cannabis in select locations and contexts. If you grew up in the following 30 years, you know it got Amsterdam quite a reputation and a boatload of tourism money. Beginning in the 70s, we began to take a real look at cannabis to see what sort of scientific curiosities it might contain. We found it's a fantastic medicine for those suffering from the effects of AIDS, glaucoma, chemotherapy, and a slew of other conditions. Slowly, the world began to start prescribing the medical use of cannabis, with Canada becoming the first country to do it countrywide in 2001. Yeah, we have a history with these kinds of things. Then, Portugal called our bluff and decriminalized all drugs. They decided to treat drug abuse as a medical problem rather than a criminal one, and lo and behold, it seemed to work for them. Hint, hint. This followed a big wave of decriminalization, which continued until Uruguay said, "Hold my joint," and completely legalized cannabis in 2013. Now, Canada's following suit, and we'll start seeing pot in stores next Wednesday. We're already hearing there are likely to be issues with not enough of the stuff to satisfy demand. This isn't just a civil liberties victory. In a way, it's decolonization and a long overdue form of social justice. Now a society that has spent almost a century with it illegal has to rediscover how to reintegrate it into our lives. What will the new rituals be? And what will it be like without the shady dealers and counterculture aspects to it? You know, what is it going to be like to just light up a joint on a Friday night? I don't know, but I'm interested to be part of the experiment. Given the long history we have with this stuff, it's sort of like a reunion with an old friend. I want to thank my patreon.com/stepbackhistory patrons Don and Carrie Johnson, Garrett Kwan, Scott Smith, Martin King, Michael Kirshner, James McNeese, Luis Inez Guarita, Mary D'Onofrio, and William Carney Richardson. I think for the sake of this video, I should also thank Valued Customer, who is pledged on Patreon for $4.20. Nice. Like, share, subscribe, come back Saturday. And to the nice man outside of my window who is using a power grinder, thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful and uplifting day filming because of your contribution to the sonic experience of this video.